Alright, so we have a video tutorial on how to render into a backplane HDRI with Corona. I figured I'd make another one with Vray. Technique is kind of the same. There's a few differences because Corona offers a shadow capture when Vray does not. So this video is going to kind of go over that. So first things first is you want to choose your backplate. So I'm going to choose this iconic location from LA, which is right here. And it has all this graffiti, this concrete, the LA city in the background. So that's what I'm going to choose in terms of environment. And now, as always, you kind of look at the metadata of the photo to figure out the lensing information. So for this video, let's see what backplate looks appealing. This is nice and simple. We got a big city, graffiti, concrete. All right, so we're looking at a 70 lens. And now 105 is the backplate number. So what I'm gonna do is shrink this down. I have it open on my other monitor. So first things first, create a physical camera, set it up. All right. Change the lensing to 70. Hold Shift, press F, turns on the frame extents, which is your crop of your render output. If you press F10, this window comes up. And my backplate spec is 8256 by 5504, so it's essentially 1.5, but there you go. So I'll probably render it out at 4K final. I don't really need an 8K render for this purpose. Now I'm going to hold Alt press B. This window comes up. I'm going to create a plus use files. Click on files. Paste the directory of the location. And I'm using backplate 105. Press OK. There we go. Now I'm going to press 8 to open up the environment tab. For the environment map, I'm going to just choose general bitmap. JPEG 105. There we go. Now it's going to apply it to all views, I think. And I don't really like how that happens, but it is what it is. Now I'm going to go back into my bottom right view, hold Alt press B, click use gradient, then go back to files. So that way I can still see the card normally in the other views without any backplate. Now what I like to do, and this is my personal preference, is for exposure control, use Vray exposure control, and these are the settings: 200, 5, 6, 100, neutral. This is my personal preference, and there's a reason for that, and I'll kind of go over that in a second. So, all right, now that I have that set up, it's time to kind of make sure our perspective's proper. So the way this was shot is the ground and the camera kind of match up. So what I'm going to do first is go down here, get the car to be sitting inside the ground, and I have negative camber on this, so it's just kind of like that. That's good enough for me. All right, I'm going to isolate just my ground plane, turn on wireframe, F4. Now I'm just going to extend the ground some and just make sure the angle kind of matches. So as a test, what I will do is add an edit poly modifier on top of this. And if I extrude this up, the lines should start to kind of match. That's good enough. All right, unhide the car. There we go. Now what I'll do, open up my layers tab, open up the materials tab. All right, there we go. So I'm going to press 8 again. I'm going to drag and drop this environment backplate into a material slot, make sure it's an instance, change it from spherical to screen. And then because of these exposure settings, I adjust my output RGB level to 15. This way now when I render my image, my backplate exposure matches the photography exposure, or really close. This was the value I found that works pretty well. And that's what I do. I don't really care to go into mathematics or anything. There's no logical reason besides trial and error, and that number works well for me. All right, so next thing we're going to do is go to the Create tab, go to the Lights, go to the V-Ray tab, V-Ray Light, change it from type from plane to dome, create a dome light anywhere in the scene. Now click on No Map and make sure you choose V-Ray, V-Ray bitmap. When this comes up, go back, choose your HDRI, drag and drop the HDRI into material slot as an instance. Typically HDRIs are shot inside out, and what I mean by that is just you got to flip them horizontally. There we go. So now what I'm going to do is turn on RT, and this was like a quick test before I started the video. But before we do that, drag and drop the material onto the ground. What we'll do is just rename it. And for diffuse, what we want to do is make sure it's general, camera map per pixel. Click on camera, pick the camera, texture, press bitmap, and we're loading 105. And this is going to project our environment into the ground plane as a camera projection. So you don't have to unwrap anything, none of that stuff. So now, if I turn on RT, you'll see how that's happening. All right, so there we go. Our car is sitting in place. Our environment's a little underexposed, and that's because I'm using the exposure controls. Now the way the V-Ray has it is 1 is typically a neutral value, but because of the exposure settings I use, it's not. So if I change the multiplier to 30, that's going to give me a pretty good feeling. And now what I got to do is rotate my HDRI to match what my backplate is. So 105, 103, 102. 102.5. So there we go. That feels good to me. Now if I press invisible, there we go. Now as you can see, things are matching up pretty well. The last thing I want to do is tweak my ground plane's white balance just a little bit to make sure that it kind of blends in with the backplate a little better. So I'm just going to go into my texture, output, enable color mapping, RGB, go into the blue value and just take the highlights down. There we go, and maybe take the greens down just a little bit as well. And there we go. So that right there feels pretty neutral. I can't really see a difference between my ground plane and the back plate. And the way you could test it as well is you just go and drag it kind of like this. So you could see in front of you of what's happening. So as you can see now we are seeing a difference. So what I'll do here is change the RGB value to about a 0.6, 0.7, 0.65, and now we're starting to get into that good spot, but as you can see now we're a little too blue. Turn down the blue value a little bit, turn down the green value, and now as you can see this line is almost seamless. To me this is good enough. I'm going to do it like this. There we go. I'm going to do V-Ray properties on the ground plane, -1 for alpha. There we go. And there we go. That is how I would set up my backplate and HDRI render in V-Ray. And now what you can do is, start adding your own strobes, whatever you want to the shot. But in a nutshell, that's as simple as it is. It's like if people are making it way more complex than this, they're just overthinking it. Because all you need is you set up your background, you set up your HDRI. If the assets are shot properly, they're gonna match up. Whenever I shoot my backplates and HDRIs, I make sure my white balance of the two elements matches. So as you can see, the car feels pretty natural in the shot. The shadows are matching what the backplate shadows are. The white balance is the same. I had to tweak the ground white balance just a smidge, which I've noticed I've always have to do. I've done this with all the HDRIs. It's always a little too cool. But other than that, if it's done right and your assets are done well, it's going to match. Now, if you are putting this into a place where they shot the backplate over here, but the dome was, I don't know, 100 feet down the street, yeah, you're gonna have issues. And that's what happens with a lot of companies on the internet, is their photographers When they shoot the backplate HDRIs, they don't think about what the automotive industry is doing. And what we're doing is we're putting a CGI shot where the backplate is shot. So what happens is the companies they hire these freelance photographers that just go out and shoot domes. They don't really do the CGI. So they just shoot a dome. They think as long as it's in the location, it won't matter. The quality is going to be the same. Well, no, that's a big problem. You want to shoot the HDRI where you would put a CGI car. And that's when I was shooting this location. I shot it right here where all the backplates were kind of focused on. Typically, if I shoot different spots of the backplate, I'll shoot a few different domes so that way the reflections match up. But then what's very important is on the processing side. You don't want to make your backplates look gorgeous and then your dome is pretty neutral and flat because you don't really process a 32-bit dome with all kinds of curves and white balance adjustments. And again, that's what makes it hard for CGI artist to make a rendering with a car that fits a backplate because now your backplate has all this color processing, all these beautiful things, but your dome doesn't match. So when you render a car, it pops out. So if you have a foundation where your dome, your backplate, everything matches up, you just put in a Vray HDRI, put it in the backplate, match the lensing, and you're pretty much done. And now, just like in photography, you have your photo, you go into Photoshop, you have all your alphas for the car, everything. Now you just start playing with it and tweaking it. So I'm not really going to do the post processing part of the videos since this is all now subjective and matter of opinion of how you want to modify the image and post. But this covers the basics of setting up a backplate HDRI in V-Ray and rendering it into the scene.